Bunch of chewy.
Hello, I'm Dave.
I'm Richard.
And I'm Mark.
And welcome to the Doctor Who show's Gin and TARDIS. I don't know what episode we're up to now. Five. 5, there you
A
go.
bit like these cans, 5 and 6.
You lose count after a while. It's good to have you guys back. We have just watched
The Happiness Patrol.
Special Edition.
Yes.
Yes.
So we all got together on the couch, had a few gin and tonics. I must admit, I had my work Christmas lunch earlier, so
He's
You're
very
already
merry.
well lubricated.
very well lubricated.
Yeah.
So we hadn't watched the Special Edition before.
No.
Let's get some very quick reactions first, then go back to when we first saw it and go into a bit more depth. Mark, what did you make of that? We only turned it off about 5 minutes ago. What did you make of the Happiness Patrol Special Edition?
Look, there were some bits that instantly stuck out as they were new, and the effects were pretty good in terms of making the planet look bigger.
Yes.
But it still doesn't fix quite a lot of the cheapness of the original production. I'm a bit overwhelmed, actually, I'll be honest with you, watching it again, because I'm just like, does the extra material add much to it? No, I don't think it does.
No, I'm a little bit the same. I actually still a little 50-50 what I thought of it. I'm going to start with, it's not really a confession, but I haven't watched this for a very long time, and it would be over 25 years.
Wow.
And I reckon, actually, that's probably only about the third or maybe fourth time I've ever seen it.
Right.
So I actually don't remember it well enough, other than the really obvious CGI stuff. I actually probably don't remember it well enough to pick most of the reinserted scenes or whatever. In terms of the story itself, it's got some really good moments in it. It's very uneven though. I think probably be my just having turned the telly off. Parts 1 and 2 sort of build up. As part 3 feels very rushed.
Yeah, I also had a very uneven response to it. Look, I have seen this more often than you and more recently than you, Richard, but it's not an era or indeed a story that I've put off the shelf as much as some of the others.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was at no point bored by it.
No,
I got through the 3, realistically 3.5 parts without sort of trouble.
Yeah, that's fair.
There was some stuff that I really enjoyed. I think the Candyman particularly was pretty cool. There's some ideas in there that I thought worked, but there's also some scenes that we weren't just looking at each other going, what are they doing?
What's all that about?
What's all that about?
Yeah.
And there are some plot points as well where I was certainly sitting there going, that just doesn't make sense.
No.
A couple of months ago on the monthly podcast, Rob and I did a deep dive into season 24. And we
My
said
condolences.
and we said there that there were a lot of really neat ideas.
Yep.
And you can see where Cartwell's sort of going, and it does improve as it goes along, but there's also a lot of stuff that just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And Cartwell particularly doesn't seem that practiced at putting together a narrative structure.
No,
Yes.
and pacing, I think, is a problem, because from watching that, I very much got the impression there's obviously, just looking at the time codings, there's obviously a fair bit gone back into, about 4 or 5 minutes gone back into each of parts 1 and 2.
Yes.
But I from the times, I don't think there's much gone back into part 3,
No,
which
about
suggests that they obviously had time or didn't use their time effectively and filmed a lot of extra stuff for parts 1 and 2, and were really pushing against the clock to get part 3 in the can. And as I said, it feels really rushed. And
very uneven.
And missing that. There's just pieces that you would think there would be a couple of exposition scenes actually would have made that flow a lot better.
Yeah.
Well, for instance, we see Joseph C and Gilbert M sort of talking, and next minute they're in the shuttle. And why is Gilbert M suddenly riding around with the Happiness Patrol in their little buggy? Very, very strange, some of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I just want to quickly pick up a point you made, Mark, where you said that the new special effects and CGI makes it look bigger, and it does.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that I've found that really highlighted how small the actual sets were.
Yes.
And there really are moments when you sort of you pan down from this big vista to what is very clearly a very small corner of the studio.
It's a cupboard.
where they have to sort of menacingly stalk about 3 paces across the room.
Yeah.
And so it did sort of it did feel very uneven as well. It was cool to see, but it did seem very uneven. And this takes me back to when I first saw it, which was at a local club meeting. Would have been at the end of 1988, I reckon, and maybe a little bit later because I saw Remembrance screen before I saw this, so maybe early 89.
Yeah.
I remember being in a room at Melbourne Uni watching this.
Okay.
Actually, Ridley College, I should say.
Okay.
And everyone just sort of looking around afterwards and going, I don't know what that was. And in 1988, this was a very unusual piece of Doctor Who. And we've had a while to get used to it, but it's still it's still very unusual for Doctor Who.
And especially compare it to what preceded it, where Remembrance is a traditional stonking Doctor Who story, and you think, oh right, okay, is this what it's going to be like now? And then all of a sudden you get that. Now remind me, was the running order of that season changed because of the Olympics or something? Was it supposed to be Remembrance and Greatest Show? Is that how it was supposed to be?
Silver Nemesis got switched, so it would be broadcast
on the
anniversary.
Yeah, and this one was filmed last, but then shown second, unless you're in Australia, in which case it was shown last.
Right.
But which we'll get to a bit later.
Yeah.
But, so I didn't see it at a club meeting. I remember going to one where they showed Silver Nemesis and Greatest Show.
Yeah, I remember that one.
I don't remember seeing this at a club meeting. So I actually saw this, because the ABC was so far behind.
Correct.
I saw that, and it was like probably nearly 12 months later.
It was,
that I saw that when it was on the ABC.
Yeah.
And then pretty much I think I went to a club meeting, and then almost straight away afterwards I saw Battlefield and Fenric.
You're welcome.
At the
yes,
the
Mark,
Christmas
we
party.
get it.
Thank you, Mark.
I just want to,
You're the best, Mark.
You're welcome.
Yeah, which probably just the quick point I had is, I said a minute or two ago, it'd been over 25 years since I've seen this, because I saw the McCoy era really disjointedly.
Yeah.
And going back to your season 24 discussion, by the time the ABC started showing McCoy stuff, see, I'd left school, deferred uni, got a first real job, car, that sort of stuff. So I was completely divorced from the afternoon television stuff. I think there were times I didn't even know Doctor Who was on. So I saw McCoy really disjointedly, which is probably why I think of the classic Doctors, he's the one I've sort of engaged with, or whatever, at least over the journey. I didn't know at that time very many people watching it. And, look, the back office of the Big Four bank I worked in the late 80s probably wasn't the kind of place you walked into and went, so, who's a Doctor Who fan?
No, not really.
No. And it's probably why I watched it. I watched it when it was on the ABC, and I think I got tapes from somebody. And then I think I watched it probably late 90s. Probably actually when we were setting up for Time Storm, the Sophie Con, I think. But I don't reckon I've watched it since.
I think we should probably highlight the fact that this reflects a lot of what we saw in season 24, which is, if you imagine a lot of those stills as panels in a comic book,
yeah,
you could really sort of imagine that. And even, I think you sort of mentioned, Richard, it lacks a little bit of that narrative flow. You could almost imagine those little sort of comic book, meanwhile over here, or little did Joseph see no, like just those little sort of things that just move it through.
That's right, actually. The comic book thing's interesting. That was one point I was thinking while I was watching it. This would not be out of place in something like 2000 AD.
Yeah.
I mean, there's even a Judge Dredd comic where it's called The Day the Law Died, where Judge Caligula takes over the Judges Guild and makes his goldfish deputy chief judge or whatever, but it's that sort of bonkers stuff that they actually did. And while I was watching it, I was kind of also thinking, this is kind of like a holiday camp or Disneyland gone bad. That sort of Disneyland being the happiest place on earth type thing. It's gone bad. You will come in here and you'll be happy. Sort of Tim Burton does Disneyland type thing. Very sort of dark and twisted and really...
I was going to say Joel Schumacher. It's actually very cheap looking. Batman and Robin, or Batman Forever, that sort of gaudy style.
Yes.
And you can see what they're doing, and sometimes it works. Like, I think some of those big shots of the roof of the candy kitchen where you see the cogs going and everything, that looks pretty cool. There's other stuff where it looks like a very cheap set. And it doesn't matter how much CGI you throw around it.
No, it still looks cheap. And I mean, this was obviously the in-studio one to balance all the location filming they did for the rest of the season. Yeah. Well, the thing of the rest of the season's got... There's a lot of...
Actually, there's quite a bit, actually.
There is. Well, I mean...
Well, Silver Nemesis was entirely
on location.
Yes, well, I was going to say... I was about to say Greatest Show. I know they had to because there was the asbestos scare or whatever. Yeah. But there's quite a bit in Remembrance as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably useful to sort of look back at the myth and the legend and the reality of what this story was, because I think that feeds a lot of the disjointedness that we kind of felt watching it. And when you actually look at the production history in terms of the scripts we put together... Graham Curry and Andrew Cartmell clearly got together and said, right, let's do something that's going to bring down the government. And, Cartmell and his find the people's power, down with Thatcher. And,
dear Mr. Echo.
They were sort of doing all that sort of thing. Yeah. And then they've shown the draft of JNT who's like, are you kidding? Like, they want to destroy our show and you want to put this out? Like, you sort of give them an excuse, like take all the politics out of it and just give us something. So you can sort of see that done. And then Sheila Hancock gets it and says, oh,
it's Maggie.
The woman's the baddie's a woman. I know, I'll do Margaret Thatcher. Yeah. And suddenly, I mean, it's not consistently a Margaret Thatcher performance, but she definitely throws in, particularly in part one, those stuff.
Yes.
Families are very important.
The inflictions and
funnily, while we were talking about it, I was actually reminded of that episode of The Goodies, the politics one, where and where they do that broadcast and he's paired with Bill, and they go, "We are now in a time of crisis."
It is our solemn duty to tell you. So I think thematically, it's actually a lot more of a mess than I think a lot of fans sometimes I think intend. Because a lot of the intent is being sort of ripped out, then it's sort of been sprinkled back in a bit. And I think that's a shame because as a sort of a, polemic against Thatcherism, it doesn't really work. Like, okay, Helen A is a horrible female leader. The writers didn't like Thatcher, sort of, whatever. But what I think it is a much better reflection of a lot of those dictatorships that you had in the 80s. I mean, this is a time when Pinochet was at his height. Ceausescu still hadn't fallen.
Yeah, that's right.
I think Tito may or may not. It was sort of Tito.
Yeah, that's right.
So, I mean, even Spain, wasn't a democracy until the 80s. So, a lot of those European sort of strongman things where people would just disappear. And indeed, look, when we're recording this the week after the fall of Assad in Syria, where people, the big thing a lot of people are talking about now is, can I find out what happened to my friends and relatives who disappeared?
Correct.
So I think there's a really powerful point to make about that in there. And the thing is, I don't think the story quite knows if it's a really wacky comic book thing where she genuinely wants people to be happy, or if that's sort of just the hook to get you into a much darker and deeper story about oppression and dictatorship.
I know it's very uneven because there are sort of vibes at the end when things are starting to crumble. You sort of almost get that 1945 bunker type thing, or the collapsing regime where everybody's just suddenly out for themselves and it's time to make a run for it.
There's
nothing wrong here, but
but we're all going.
It's again, it's
you stand a post, I'm leaving.
It's Ceausescu, sort of packing the suitcases and not quite getting away fast enough.
What's wrong with you? He's on there.
Again, it's Assad like, I'm just going to get on a plane to Moscow just in case. I mean, we've seen it time and time and again. So I think that it's a shame it doesn't really lean into that because it doesn't quite know what it wants to lean into. And I think that's probably because JNT is pulling it one way, Cartmell and Curry are pulling it another way, Sheila Hancock's pulling it another way, and there's lots of really cool ideas in there. And this idea that you can oppress people via, freedom, withdrawing their freedom of speech, their freedom of expression, is really cool. I just don't think it really lands anywhere.
No.
And I'm not quite sure what the Doctor does.
Well, he overthrows a government in 9 hours. I mean, that's exactly right.
But what does he do? Well, he tells the drones to be happy in part 3.
Yeah.
And then they're like, well, I'll just go and happily blow up some stuff.
He's not really encouraging it, is he? He's just basically subverting things underneath.
I suppose you can say it's sort of like in some ways he's supposed to be the catalyst, because you can see some of the more manipulative McCoy and the ideas that McCoy is now. He's actually going to places specifically to put the situation right. He has that thing with Ace when she's having her little blind rage.
Yes, you're no good to me like this.
Yeah, exactly. He's obviously trying to focus her so she'll go and blow up whatever it is he wants blown up.
And that stuff's really good.
He's actually very good, He's very good at that,
But he's not actually... You're right, you don't sort of get the impression he's proactively moving the pieces around to do... Things just kind of happen.
He's just like doing it half-assed, isn't he? Really, he's not like in season 26 when he's really going full throat master manipulator. He's just going, I'll just tweak over here, tweak over there, and all of a sudden, regime collapse. I mean, they should have sent him to Syria years ago. Would have been sorted out by then, surely.
And that's a good segue to sort of start talking a bit about the special edition.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I did take away from some of the extra scenes, I think, is that it does add a bit of that backstory and that sort of sense that there's a lot going on under the surface.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of extra scenes with Susie Q.
Yeah.
Where you realise, she talks about having to give away her blues records and,
Oh, yeah.
and all the rest of it. So
Yeah.
I think the first time we see her in the normal edition is when she's in the room with Ace already.
Yeah.
So all those sort of backstory pieces are actually quite good.
Yeah.
You get the extra scene with the snipers,
Yeah.
where the one dude's like, clearly he's sort of like, I actually don't like shooting people. And the other guy's like, I do. I've got the big gun, and the other guy's like...
Until you actually have to do it up close.
Until you have to do it up close. So that sort of stuff, I think, does sort of add a lot more to this idea of a society. But again, for all the great CGI, and I mean, when we all said, that opening shot where you see the big CGI landscape of the colony, we go, oh, wow, that's very cool.
That's actually pretty cool,
But what they can't add in with CGI is a population.
No.
And again, this sort of sense that the entire planet consists of 2 happiness patrols and Silas P. Trevor Signal wandering around, there's never this sense that if you're doing this today, there would be 50 extras.
Of course.
And there'll be people in the forum. There'll be people, they'll have the obligatory, I've gone to the shop to buy something weird, I've met a local,
Yeah, it is kind of that idea. You don't really get much of an idea of how the society actually functions.
Yeah.
I mean, they mention the sugar beet factories and whatever, but you don't actually see it. There's all the things that happen in the forum, but you don't actually see the forum because doing that would take time and money and mean hiring 50 extras.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I thought was disappointing by it is we get 2 or 3 scenes of the Candyman before his first execution. And I think that actually didn't work as well. I think that it works quite well in the broadcast version where there's all these sort of mentions of, the Candyman will do this, or go see the Candyman, don't see the Candyman. And then suddenly you see the Candyman, it's like, oh, wow, that's the Candyman. Whereas this time he's sort of introduced having, the first of his domestic fights with Gilbert M. And there were a lot more of those inserted. We can talk about that in a moment.
I can feel one of my moves coming on.
And look, I've got to say, I think the Candyman's the highlight of the story.
The Candyman is cool. Once you sort of move past this, what a crazy idea it is. The Candyman is actually cool.
And that's the Cartmel era, almost in a nutshell. If you buy this idea of, okay, there's just a bad guy, a henchman made of candy, who cares, just go with it. Once you get to the, I'll just go with it, he's really funny and he's really cool.
His job is to kill people through, lollies, or fondant surprise.
Yes, and he gets some of the best exchanges, and
he does.
Particularly him with Gilbert. Tell him what I'm trying to say, Gilbert. He makes sweets that kill people. All those scenes I was loving.
Yeah.
But do they fit in with some of the other scenes? I'm not quite sure.
No.
What do you think of the Candyman, Mark?
Look, it does look like Bertie Bassett, let's be honest with you. But I remember the book had the depiction of the Candyman, just a guy in a white lab coat.
Well, that's what he was, wasn't he? Meant to be.
Yeah, he's supposed to be. Yeah, pasty face and looked like he worked at EMI Records. Had the doctor's coat on.
Woods from...
Yeah, exactly.
From Willy Wonka. Yeah.
Look, it does sort of suit that, as I said, that sort of Schumacher look, to sort of amp it up, the campness of it. But actually, I think it would have been probably more frightening if you actually brought it down a level and actually have it, quite sadistic almost person. Yeah, maybe a couple of facial disfigurements, or maybe a licorice all sort for an eye, or something like that. But I think it. Looking at it now, I think. Remember that rumour saying it was going to be filmed in black and white. I think it would have been the perfect thing for it. I actually think that film noir look on it. And Dave probably could have turned the TV down, on the black and white. But I think actually, if they brought it down from 11 to say 3 or 4, where you sort of had that more normal look, and I think that would be more effective because it's a bit it's like glam rock, but it just sort of does it just hides it under a layer of camp. And I know it's supposed to be campy, but I think actually if you made it more realistic in a way, I think the tone of it would have been a bit more frightening.
So what about the Happiness Patrol themselves? Because I remember them being very controversial when this first came out.
Yeah.
The wigs and the costumes.
Yeah.
I mean, look, you get what they're going for. It's that facade, and they've got the wigs and the facade makeup, and, they're all, big beaming smiles and whatever, but...
Is it threatening, really? I mean, you think about it, they're driving in cars that can't go more than 3 miles an hour.
Now, I remember that little go-kart thing being crapper than that. So I reckon...
Do you reckon they've turned the film up to make it go?
I reckon they might have cut a scene there, because I remember it being a bit sort of... not as I said, a bit crapper than it looked watching it now.
Yeah, I don't know whether the film's been sped up like 5%.
Benny Hill, Goody style,
it's obviously not Goody style, just raw, but it did feel like maybe it had gone 5% faster. Yeah, I genuinely don't know. I mean, we've now we've had 30-something years of the Happiness Patrol, so we didn't get those wigs and those costumes on screen and go, oh my god, what's happening? We expect it, we're used to it, but I still don't quite know if that works, which is a shame because I think the characters are very interesting, and you've got those different sort of dictatorship types. You've got Daisy Kay, who just, this is the regime and I'm part of it and I'm going to enjoy it. You've got Priscilla P, who's clearly just a nasty piece of work.
And a fanatic, she's described as a fanatic.
A proper fanatic. You've got Silas P, who is a bit of a bastard, but basically, this is my day job.
Yeah, that's right.
I just want to be promoted and get a bigger house to put my kids in.
Yeah.
So I think that sort of sense, and even as I said with the snipers, you've got the one who's like, well, this is my job, and I don't really enjoy it, but I'll turn up at 9, go home at 5, and whatever. And the other guy is like, oh, I want my gun.
I want my gun.
There's so many good ideas going on. It's just, it feels very weird. And then you throw in the pipe people.
Oh, they're really I'm sorry. They just I'm looking at them and going, this really encapsulates, what did I call them? Really Exelons.
Yeah.
The Exelons are only 14 years before, and they look great. They look really good, but they just look like a really cheap, chuck some kids in a goddamn awful sack and going things like, wicked. They're awful. They are absolutely awful.
A year before we had the Tetraps, and look, the Tetraps have dated. But at least they look okay.
They tried to do something with them, but these is like kids in sacks going, wicked, and it just look at something really bad Ewoks.
Which I guess then maybe leads us on to Fifi.
Well, I was about to say the same thing, but let's just also make the point. I don't quite know what the fight pipe people are meant to add to the story.
Well, they're obviously meant... I got the impression they're meant to be the oppressed natives.
Well, for sure.
That doesn't do anything with them.
Yeah, that's my point. Clearly they've gone, let's put some oppressed natives in here, let's get those colonialist vibes, all the rest of it. So they're trying to make a point, but are they just trying to make a point too many? And it just doesn't land.
It's another thing into the mix that doesn't land and doesn't give it the room to breathe about what they're really there for. There's a line there about what they were or whatever, and it's buried, and that's it.
And there is a newly inserted line about, oh, don't worry, you'll be frolicking in the sugar field soon or something.
That's right. Yeah.
So, that adds a little bit, but I think, again, it's just, Carmel and Curry had these really cool ideas, we're going to overthrow colonialism, down with Thatcher, and it just doesn't quite land. And as you say, Mark, the costumes are woeful. Even for the McCoy, they're woeful. Yeah. And Richard, let's go on to Fifi.
Yeah. What did you say, Mark? Something out of Fraggle Rock.
Oh, yeah, I did actually. That's a bit unkind.
Again, in 1988, look, it was probably never going to be anything other than a hand puppet.
Yes. But in 1988, it looks like a hand puppet.
Well, yes, it did. I mean, they've obviously made an effort. Look, it's got moving eyes and it can...
The eyes actually
whatever.
Cool.
But, look, it hasn't aged terribly well. The shots of Fifi running around in the pipes.
Yes.
You think they would have learnt from Talons, right?
Yeah.
You think they would have learnt from Talons with the rat. Yeah. Oh, let's just do the same thing again with a smaller rat.
Yeah.
And it looks like a ferret down a pipe.
It does look like a ferret, actually. But
and the problem is, if this is just a bit of a side little thing, you go, okay, they're not going to put too much money in what's a little sort of side thing, that's fine. But it's meant to be sort of the big thread of part 2. It's the big thread of the climax of part 3. It's then, the whole setup for the resolution of the story.
Yeah.
And look, as good as Sheila Hancock's acting is, and it is very good.
She's very good.
I don't necessarily think she's made all the right choices, but she's got a thing she's going for, and she does it very well. And as good as her acting is, but at the end of the day, it is Sheila Hancock just trying on a very bad puppet. And so when Fifi's meant to be the big threat, the big piece of sort of heightened tension, and then the emotional resolution of the story, and it just looks terrible. I mean, it looked terrible in 88, and it looks really bad now.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to counteract that.
Ooh.
Now, here you go. So basically, I completely agree with you. However, the last 3 or 4 years, I've become a dog owner. And when she was cradling...
This is the first time you've ever owned a dog?
No, but...
in your recent adult life?
Yeah, so basically this dog's been dumped. Anyway, it's a long story. and this is not.
And what sort of dog is it? Small dog?
It's a very small border collie with high anxiety and needs 5 walks a day. Now, when Sheila Hancock was cradling that animal,
yep.
I go, oh, that could be, in how many years' time the dog could pass. So,
what, having sugar dumped on it?
Well, just like I'm trying to get to an analogy here, Richard. But I just thought, now I'm a sort of dog owner. I was like thinking, yeah, I'd be a bit upset as well if that happened to me.
I get her being upset.
Yeah,
it's just I'm taken out of it because she's just crying to this really
she's cradling a puppet.
Tacky puppet.
But I'm thinking of it definitely going, well, that could be my dog.
Okay.
Well,
in how many years' time, Richard?
For you, Mark, I'm sorry we laughed, but.
Well, my dog's not dead. I'm just saying it could happen.
Because you first see Fifi and it's sort of stuck in this bird cage, basically. This big long thing in
Richard,
a bird
I'm trying
cage.
to draw big long strokes
And then, after Fifi's been blown up with the Nitro 9,
yeah, look,
there's all the sort of she's fawning over it with the bandages, and then 10 minutes later, she take the bandages off. Oh, you're all healed.
And back in the pipe.
Get back in there.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, and I think, Dave, as you said, there's lots of concepts in there thrown in. It's just very typical McCoy. Lots of concepts thrown in, but the execution does not, A, pay off, or B, just doesn't help.
And I remember there's that doco about the cancellation of the show. They talk a bit about what would have happened in season 27.
Yeah.
And Cartmel and Ben Aronovich are both interviewed in that, and they both sort of make the point, by the time they were thinking about the 27th season and what would be in it, they both actually sort of worked out, okay, this is what the budget can do, this is what the BBC can do, and so, they had all these ideas about, the bigger Earth thing and the Enterprise type ship that, turn around these Ace of the Captain, they're gone, but we would never have done that. We would have done something on contemporary Earth, or or the distant, or the Regency era or the Victoria, because we know they can do that. And they clearly, you said that in season 26, they set them all on Earth. Ghost Lady's just done with stock costumes. Battlefield is the one that's probably stretching the budget, and that's the one that I think looks the weakest, apart from the Destroyer. But here, I think Cartmel still hasn't quite got a sense of what the BBC can make and how it's going to affect his story. And so it just doesn't quite work.
Why didn't he talk to J&T? Why didn't, this is the thing, the J&T's been there for so long. Hey, I've got these stories. What do you think we should do? Well, we can't do that because, if we want to do something in a freighter, go and see Earthshock with those leather chairs. You know what I mean? That whole thing could have been tempered going, well, actually, this, we can't do this, and yeah.
Compared to where everything sort of fell down around Greater Show the Galaxy with the asbestos.
Yeah.
And suddenly you can almost get that sense of, and look, Greater Show's got its problems, but J&T's got that sense of, there's a challenge for me to rise to, I can make this work. And you see J&T's creativity come here. Whereas with this one, you just sort of get a sense, you said to Cartmel, look, make something that's all done in 2 sets. To balance the budget. Cut the politics out of it, just put it on a monster.
And I'm going to America. I'll see you on Monday.
Yeah, I mean the thing is with I will give quite a bit of credit. About 2 or 3 years previously, Doctor Who was in a rut creatively, where it's very stock standard almost. It's like, you land on the planet, do this, and there's this almost formula. At least with. I'll give Cartmel, a lot of credit. He's trying to shake it up. And yes, I'm landing on a planet, but it's actually this. Yeah. It looks like this.
Yeah, and the monster's a lot more of a conceptual monster.
Correct, yeah. The world building is a lot more, as you say, comic book. Where, you look at Sayward's stuff, it's very... Look at Trial of a Time Lord a couple of years earlier, Christ almighty. It's...
Yeah, you've got a world, you've got a leader, you've got a system, you've got police, you've got characters within that, some of whom support the regime, some of whom don't. I think that, I probably sound a little bit down on this.
No, I don't think you are. No,
but there's a lot of good in this.
There is. It's got some really interesting ideas, and some of them are done quite well. It's just the ones that aren't. And as I said, it just feels... My main takeaway from it, having watched all 3 episodes, is just how rushed Part 3 is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot that just happens in Part 3 because it happens.
Yeah.
And again, I think this is Cartmel's lack of experience as a script editor.
Correct.
You can imagine Terence Dix looking at that script and going, right, well, there's a whole lot of just... I was going to say waste and padding.
Barry said this we're going to rip it out.
There's a lot of stuff in Part 1 that was taken out and I think made for a better Part 1.
Yeah.
But Terence Dix would have said, right, that means we've got a bit more time to film part 3. What do we need to add into part 3 to make it all come together?
Correct.
Whereas I think they've just massively overrun on part 1, and part 3 they just get this in the can.
I think so. We're running out of time. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's sad, really, isn't it? Really,
Well, they lost a couple of pages of the script, one or the other.
or lost the stopwatch. I don't know. I don't think they ever had one. Can I just talk?
Because clearly the stuff. Well, no, because it's clearly the stuff wasn't filmed.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing to go back into part 3.
No.
Obviously.
No.
So that tells you that they were really rushed.
Yeah. There's a couple of other performances we'll talk about, but I just want to highlight the great music of Dominic Glynn in that story.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. No. Dun, 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 dun. Now, you all know my opinion of Kef the Hammer. However, Dominic Glynn, again, rises to the challenge and really understands that world and what it's trying to do, and brings in that counterpoint. Obviously, it's got the blues and everything like that. So you got a guy doing a harmonic. Well, he's not playing it. Spoiler. But the music he does on that series is really good. And in fact, he's one of the most... He's a neglected composer of the last 3 years of Doctor Who. It's always McCulloch for the wrong reasons, or Ayres because he did a lot more. Where, the Glynn scores for me, the 3 he did in that McCoy era, are recognisable and really interesting.
That was what I was about to say. I've spoken about my regard for Glynn before, but you're right, particularly those 3 McCoy stories he does, Dragonfire, Happiness, Patrol and Survival. They're all distinct and they're all memorable.
And he gets it.
He gets it. And one of the things that really does thematically work in this is absolutely the score.
Yeah.
I think that, again, when you stretch part 1 out to 30 minutes, there's probably a little bit too much score. Yeah. It does overstay its welcome a little bit. Interesting though it was. But I think that's definitely something worth highlighting. You had some comments about the person playing the harmonica though, Mark, as we were watching it.
Well... And I think Richard would probably help me out on this. El Sigma, the actor, I can't remember his name, was slightly a wooden performance, I would say.
I don't think he got quite what he was being asked to do. I don't think.
No. I noticed that there were a lot of scenes of his that had apparently ended up on the cutting room floor.
Yes.
And been reinserted. And I don't think that does him any favours.
It didn't help. Absolutely right. No. There was some... No, he just did... As you said, he just didn't get it. In that role, you needed somebody who was more almost down and out. He was dressed too clean. He looked too clean. He should have been a lot older and really sort of a bit more grisly. I feel.
The intention is he's obviously meant to be a Medstun. I mean, the immediate question is, what the hell's he doing there in the first place?
Well, I don't understand.
That's part of my thing about the society. What is there actually to see on Terra other than the sugar beet fields?
Well.
Or go and visit the Candyman.
Well, the waiting zone is obviously their version of the security kitchen. We just sit outside. The security hallway.
The other problem that he has, being a weaker actor in this, is that one of the strengths of the Happiness Patrol is the cast is fantastic.
It's really good.
John Normington, Leslie Dunlop.
Yeah, exactly.
Sheila Hancock, Harold Innocent.
Georgina Hale, all those. Really good, top notch.
Really strong. I mean, that is, some of the I mean, their names.
Yeah, exactly.
They're the names of 80s British television.
Yeah.
And so there are some really strong performances. So if you're a little bit weaker in that cast, it's going to stand out because they are uniformly excellent. I mean, Harold Innocent. Let's talk about him for a moment.
Oh, yeah.
He is someone who has got the assignment.
Yes,
and he's having a lot of fun.
Yeah,
and I think one of the things that does work on the special edition is seeing all the scenes with him and the Candyman put back.
He plays off the Candyman really well.
Yeah.
Yes, and you get that sort of that dysfunctional relationship come through a lot more than you do on the broadcast version.
He's actually very, very good.
Yeah, he's a highlight of this.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a very strong cast. I mean, that's the thing. You can't really fault some of the McCoy stuff. They've got a really good, strong cast in most of those stories. It's just you get one of those two. It's like having Shitty Gatwa and Millie Gibson. I mean, Millie Gibson outshines Shitty Gatwa every time. Hold on, wrong podcast. Sorry.
We're going to go Jodie and Bradley Walsh.
Anyway, moving on.
Richard, you've come with some notes.
Right, the copious notes time. Here we go.
This is how we get out of get your foot out of your
Come
mouth.
on, Mr. Pixley, hit it.
No, look, I did have some notes about how it was screened here in Australia.
Yeah, and you haven't asked me the other question about how the tapes got here, but we'll talk about that later.
I'm sorry. Do we have you to thank, Mark, for the copies that were circulating around the club here in the late 80s,
There was a very interesting
Mark?
story about that, but I don't want to distract from your wonderful
tell
research.
your story, mate. No, tell your story, Mark. Come on.
Mine will be the entree to your main course, so please feast on your main course.
Well, entrees
come first. Do you want to do that? Again, I'm sorry. Do we have you to thank, Mark, for the copies that were circulating around Australian fandom in the late 80s, Mark? Is that where the homage is due?
You're welcome. No, so I'll tell you a story here, but before I do the story, I want you, like a restaurant, I'm, the entree and the main course. However, I'll sometimes go straight to main. Go for it.
All right. Well,
however, okay, thank you. No.
All right, so just a quick notes about how it's screened here in Australia.
Yeah.
It showed here in late November, early December 1989, so we're 12 months basically after the UK.
Wow.
Yeah. We're firmly in that afternoon show era, and they would put Doctor Who on for a few weeks and then take it off and show a repeat run of Degrassi or something
again,
or a new season, and then bring Doctor Who back for a bit.
Television.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They'd actually been showing Tom Baker repeats for a couple of months, from sort of June through to about August, which was Seeds of Doom through to Invisible Enemy.
That's right.
They'd actually shown the earlier Tom Bakers earlier in the year. Before, as I mentioned, a break to run through a run of Degrassi Junior High.
Yeah, again.
Yep. Oh no, I think that was in production for quite a while. Degrassi.
It was.
I think I remember my sister watching it.
I think we all did, didn't we? Yeah.
I didn't because I was at work, Mark. But yes, I do remember my sister watching it.
My memory of someone who was watching at the time was that they did a full repeat run of the Kids of Degrassi Street.
Yep.
And then it kept going and sort of caught up to Degrassi.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, there you go.
And then Degrassi The Next Generation, Degrassi Deep Sleep 9.
So Doctor Who returned on Friday the 20th of October. So they did repeats of season 24 and showed Remembrance before going into the rest of season 25.
Wow.
Now, they showed them in production code order here.
Oh, cool.
So they showed them as Greatest Show, Nemesis, and then Happiness Patrol. Now, depending on where you were in Australia, around this time, some of the Doctor Who screenings were interrupted on different days by one or more of the cricket, the golf, or the tennis, just depending on where you were. Here in Melbourne, the Happiness Patrol screened right at the end of November, the 28th and 29th, which was a Tuesday and a Wednesday, with episode 3 the following Monday. Now, that was interrupted here in Melbourne by the tennis from Kooyong. It was paired with Inspector Gadget.
Wow.
And the Ratties, if anyone remembers that.
The
Ratties.
Ratties.
Yeah. Now that for anyone,
I don't remember it fondly, but I do remember it.
Well, for anyone who doesn't know what the Ratties was, it was a 5-minute animated series about a family of rats.
Yeah.
Now it was created by Laura Milligan and narrated by her slightly more famous father, Spike.
Oh, yes.
Now, after they'd shown Doctor Who, they then went into Countdown Revolution, if you remember that, when they dropped Molly. And
with
then,
Chook?
Yes.
Chook?
Yes, and Tanya Lacey, I think.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
After they dropped Molly.
Yeah.
And then at 6:30 was EastEnders. So Doctor Who was 5:30. Yeah, Countdown Revolution at 6.
I used to watch EastEnders.
And then EastEnders at 6:30.
Yeah.
Do that again, right? The Doof Doof version.
Yeah, well, and then because EastEnders ran here for a number of years until David Hill said, "No, you're not buying enough of our product. We're going to stop it."
Yeah.
But now we have the woman who sung the EastEnders theme in the latest series of Doctor Who. So
I've come full circle.
It's become full circle. Tell Dexter.
Just to end this off, Happiness Patrol was actually the end of Doctor Who for 1989 on the ABC.
Yeah.
And it was replaced by a series called Spooky, which was kind of a kids supernatural themed series. I think it was a precursor to Dramarama.
Oh, okay.
Which I think Summer Dramarama was screened here. It was much bigger in the UK than it ever was here. It's actually one of David Tennant's first roles was in an episode of Dramarama when he was very young. And actually the Three Goodies turn up in an episode of Dramarama as well.
As themselves?
No, not as themselves. So they're playing bin men or something. There's a monster that lives under the bed and it's a rubbish monster. And at the end it gets taken away by the dustmen, which are the Three Goodies.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like Fifi.
Doctor Who would be back in April 1990 with, you guessed it, more Tom Baker repeats, which are the ABC's default setting.
Yes.
But
how tough we had it. Oh no, more Tom Baker classics.
Oh, season 12 again.
Yes.
Oh, what a shame.
And then in late 1990, so again 12 months after the UK, they then showed season 26.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Simpler times, eh?
So what's your story, Mark? Go on.
Oh, you want to hear it now?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, just get another gin and tonic. No, so what happened was the Doctor Who Club of Victoria's Christmas party in 88 was, well, obviously we got gazumped with the ABC showing Remembrance.
Yes.
So by default, we go, well, the next story to show at the Christmas party, because I always try and do the most recent story, would have been Happiness Patrol.
Right.
Now, there was an altercation or something happened on the committee with the original person who was going to provide their tape, withdrew the tape. And then they were relying on the only other person who's getting a tape, which was moi.
Over the horizon came Mark, clutching a tape saying,
I'll save you. Anyway, the Friday before the Christmas party, the tape didn't arrive.
Oh.
So, unfortunately, we had to disappoint a lot of people by saying we haven't got the Happiness Patrol, however, here is Remembrance again. By this time, the room just exited. And on the Monday, guess what turned up? Tape.
And had you sort of put together no afternoon programming because you were expecting to get Happiness Patrol?
No, I think we just chucked in. Oh, look, we'll put on Remembrance again. By this time, people just walked out.
Really?
Seen it. So yeah.
Because I remember at the '89 Christmas party, the afternoon programming was Battlefield and Fenric, and
yes,
I do remember a couple of wags making the. Oh, this has made it so much easier for you. You don't have to actually do any programming because everyone's going to be in here watching these.
Correct.
And we were
and indeed they were.
Yeah. And absolutely riveted.
That room was packed.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah.
So no, exactly right. Those organising those events were quite traumatic, and especially only two or three of us doing them. So it's awful. Whack them in the room with the tape on, and you can
seal the doors.
You can seal the doors and have a bit of a Valium and a cigarette and try and recover for the rest of the afternoon. But simpler times. Tape didn't turn up, but then I think by then we obviously got the tapes, and I think we had so there you go. Actually, I was just going to say. So we've obviously watched a few of these now, boys. Where would this sit in terms of the pantheon of gin and tonics?
I'm gonna say
it's better than the Twin Dilemma.
That's
an
understatement.
I would have... Well, look, Horror Fang Rock obviously is the best one we've watched, I think.
Yes.
I would probably have Carnival at 2.
Yep.
It would be a toss-up probably between this and the Gunfighters would be 3, 4, and depending on what day you asked me, I'd probably pick one or the other. I did like the Gunfighters, although we did say it was very slow in places.
But we laughed a lot
more. We did laugh a lot more.
And this one, we were actually silent. And I think we were actually watching it because of... Was this new? Was that new?
Well, I was actually watching it because, as I said, I haven't seen it for that long.
Yeah,
I was actually trying to remember what happened in it.
We actually didn't banter as much through this.
No, we didn't, actually.
Because I think actually we were quite engaged with it. Sometimes for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And again, I don't know, listeners, if we've come across as being very critical of this, and I don't think that's been our intent. We didn't hate
absolutely
this.
not.
No, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Compared to something like the Twin Dilemma, where we were regularly looking at each other, going, "What's going on?" Like that.
Yeah. And we had to order more gin in from Dan Murphy's to help us through.
I mean, there were definitely comments about
Jimmy brings.
There were definitely comments to each other about some stuff, what's going on the occasional. That looks really good. I think we all did get a good laugh for the right reasons out of the Candyman.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I just come back to it's just.
There's just something missing.
There's just something that doesn't quite gel.
Yeah.
The music's great. The cast is great. Most of the ideas are at their core great. Some of the design works. It does, however, look cheap. And the structure is just off.
Is it the direction? Is it Clough's direction? Like, if you're giving this to somebody else, I'm not going to say Graham Harper, I don't think he'd do this. But, like, could they... But then again, I suppose, if they just spent all that time re-editing it, it still hasn't worked.
I don't think the script's quite there.
No, I think it's more... No, I think
it's not, because... And again, I keep coming back to part 3, but there is stuff that happens in part 3. You just go from here suddenly to over here because that's what the script requires it to do.
Yeah.
You kind of think like, we're getting short on time. Oh, look, let's cut this scene here.
And even in part 1, with all the restored footage, the Doctor just sort of goes back and forth in the candy kitchen.
Yeah,
multiple
he
times.
just walk and he's just 1 minute he's back there. What's going
and it
on?
just makes the whole city feel very small. Which I guess
That's a
brings
good point,
me to the
actually.
question about the special edition. I've now watched all 4 of the special editions on this Blu-ray box set.
Yeah.
And it's been fun to see a whole lot of different scenes.
Right.
And it's been interesting to see what was lost from them. But fairly consistently, I've looked at the scenes that have been put back in, including most of them here, probably with the exception of some of the Gilbert M stuff and a couple of the Susie Q stuff. You can see why they've been cut.
Yeah, okay.
You know, and as you look at Remembrance, and the stuff that's been cut from Remembrance is stuff that is just padding, or it's a bit of a poor performance, or it doesn't quite work. And you know, getting that pacing up is very important.
Yeah.
I think, though, that having 5 or 6 minutes of spare material from episode 1, I mean, from a budgetary point of view, I mean, that it doesn't sound like a lot, 5 or 6 minutes, but that's what 20% of the story.
Yeah.
20% of the budget.
Yeah.
So they have wasted a lot of, in inverted commas, wasted a lot
resources to do it,
of money. Yeah. You know, compared to the days when, you know, Terrence Dicks had to write a quarrel scene so that they could get to the 24 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you know, it had to be very tight. And okay, well, we only got to 22 minutes. Right, here's a 1 minute quarrel. You know, it doesn't cost anything because we can do it on the existing set with 2 actors.
Or in time lapse, you're doing it for 5 minutes.
Well, true. And you know, it's wonderful, particularly for big fans of the McCoy era, to have all this extra stuff and be able to get these extra editions, but it's just clear that Cartmel just didn't quite have the discipline to go, right, I need to keep these scripts really tight, I need to cut them down, we can't be wasting studio time.
Yeah.
And that really comes through. So look, it's been a really interesting experience. I'm glad I've seen it. I like a lot of it. It's not going to go up to the my list of top 3 or 4 McCoy stories, but it's certainly not in my list of the bottom 3 or 4 McCoy stories, because look, I think when McCoy's good, he's really good.
Yeah, he's great.
When the McCoy era is bad, it's really
yeah. So you just said you watched them all. So if you rank them now, the special editions, in the order of your preference, go for it.
Look, Remembrance is absolutely at the top. That's a stone cold classic, and the extra scenes didn't add a lot, but they were nice to see. Silver Nemesis is probably the next one that I had the most fun watching.
Yeah.
The story completely falls apart in part 3. Like, just completely falls apart.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, it does a little bit.
Yeah.
But it is at least fun to watch, and the new CGI and everything was really cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
Then this, I think this holds together well. I enjoyed watching it. Look, we were able to watch 3 parts, really 3.5 parts, without complaining. We just powered through them and we had a good time. Greatest Show I had to watch over 3 sessions.
Really?
Okay. I know that a lot of people like the Greatest Show. Like Ghostlight, it resonates with some fans who really like it. I just found it really, really dull. And T.P. McKenna doesn't help.
No, that's another one I haven't watched for a very long time. The last time I would have watched that would have been when you and I watched it for Sonic, for the Doctor Who Club of Victoria magazine back in the late 90s. I don't reckon I've watched that since. Okay. And I must admit, it's funny you say about the multiple sessions, because my memory of that, and look, some of that is probably how we watched it, but my memory of that is actually just being bored by it. I remember there was a point we're sitting there and we're like, oh God, we're still only in part 1.
Yeah, and it's another one, Greatest Show, where I'm watching it, particularly part 1. I really quite enjoy part 1. And I'm going, right, conceptually, here's some really interesting ideas, but none of it paid off. And then when you get to the Hall of the Gods of Ragnarok, and you've got the eye and the pendulum, and I'm just like, what's
actually happening?
What's this about? Again, the themes in this are very good. I don't think they're nearly as structured and cohesive as a lot of fans want to say. This is the big left-wing takedown of Thatcher. I just don't think it's there. I know a lot of fans think there's a lot of really important gay rights commentary in this. I think some of that's come from the fact that people thought that the Killjoy at the start was wearing a pink triangle.
Which he's obviously not.
He's obviously not.
He's not. No. Yeah.
No. And I don't see it. I must admit, in a few of the restored scenes, there were some quite camp young men in pink, and I sort of thought, maybe there's something there, but I don't think it's nearly the sort of left-wing polemic or gay rights polemic that people think it is. I think
it's not.
I think there's some important stuff about oppression, some important stuff about freedom of expression, and in the age of cancel culture, where if you don't say what makes the majority happy, you're cancelled. Look, I don't know. Is there a new relevance to the Happiness Patrol? Maybe. That's a controversial statement. The Happiness Patrol is now a free speech right wing polemic. Who knows? You can make Doctor Who mean whatever you want it to mean.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's nearly as coherent as people think.
No.
It's just held together by
hope and a string of sticky tape.
and some good performances.
Would it have been better as a two-parter? Like, do you think there's enough in there for a really sharp and focused two-parter? Or it still would have struggled?
Look, I think if you wrote it now, you could make a really good 45-minute New Who episode out of it.
Yeah.
I don't think Cartmel knew how to do a tight two-parter.
No.
And like, I've got a lot of respect for Andrew Cartmel.
I do.
I think he's a great guy. I think he reinvigorated the show.
And the concepts are brilliant.
The concepts are brilliant. The comic book vibe that he did works with the McCoy budget. But
this doesn't really flow. It doesn't flow properly.
No.
Yeah, he doesn't know how to script edit.
No, he doesn't know how to use a stopwatch and say, right, I've got to get to 25 minutes.
And you know, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, Douglas Adams was a fantastic writer, a brilliant writer. Could he structure a narrative to save himself?
No.
No.
Or hand a story in a deadline?
No. So, you know, the two skills are sometimes separate. And look, Cartmel himself, I mean, you listen to the commentary on Battlefield where he and Ben Aronovich just spend the whole time
bagging it.
Well, not so much bagging it, although there is a bit of that, but just going, oh, look, now what we know 20 years later, you'd move this here to part one, you'd structure that, you get this tighter, you get the beginning of the action quicker. So they've, you know, I mean, these are guys in what was Cartmel, like 28, 29 when he did this?
Yeah, it's like even at 26, 27, I think, it was
Yeah.
like his first gig, you know. Like
First real major gig.
Real gig. So you've actually got two people on the show, JNT and him, inexperienced sort of story people, where, I mean, criticisms of Sayward and everything like that, at least the strips are fairly tight. There's not much footage left. I mean, JT bunked it all. Terence was renowned for his, laser sharp scissoring of timing. So, yeah, it's a delicate balancing act, but you go from one extreme to the other.
Yeah, and I think it's unfortunate for the show that you've got Cartmel who's got young energy, fresh ideas, but JNT's really jaded by that spot and just, I think, just not enjoying himself.
No.
And it's a shame. If JNT had maybe been 2 or 3 years earlier, he would have been really good at taking Cartmel under his wing, going, right, I've been doing this for 5 years. Let me tell you, Andrew, this is what works, this is what doesn't.
Yeah.
Whereas I think now JNT's just, can I just get something out?
Yeah, just do 4 stories. I don't care. Slop some, getting scripts together and we'll just put it on. And it's sad. But it lasts another 3 years past the cancellation. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, that was the Happiness Patrol.
Yes.
Feeling happy after it?
Happiness will prevail.
I'm glad you're happy.
I'm happy you're glad.
And on that lovely note, it's always fun to watch Doctor Who with you. Listeners, please do let us know what you think of the Happiness Patrol, particularly the special edition, because I suspect our commentary here has been as disjointed as the story itself, and reflecting of that. But we are coming back in the new year to do our promised Davo edition.
Oh, yes. What is it again? Which one?
The winner of the poll was the combination of The King's Demons and Awakening.
Yep.
So,
okay, all right, okay.
We'll be seeing some classic 2-part Davos. Until then, please come back for our monthly episode on An Adventure in Space and Time.
Oh.
We will also have a hot take of the new Doctor Who Christmas special.
My condolences.
Thank you, Mark, and I'm editorialising. We have just dropped last week our discussion on the Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King.
Right.
List makers are out, so there's a lot happening in the Doctor Who show. And I believe the 42 to Doomsday is...
Christmas episode. We'll be back, hopefully, we'll be out before Christmas. We're in the last throes of editing at the moment and just removing lots of F-bombs and adding in some fart sound effects. But it's
some of the stuff that might have legal ramifications, Mark, that...
has been edited, I hope.
Yeah,
no, it's actually still in there.
I'll do that again. Yeah. And so maybe some of the more questionable content, Mark, or is that...
No, that's still in there.
The questionable content was fine. It's the legally dubious stuff that I would like to logicate out. So, but listeners, if you've enjoyed listening to the three of us, you can hear the three of us plus Mark's Rob on the 42 to Doomsday Christmas special out anytime soon. But until then, I've been Dave.
I'm Richard.
And I'm Mark.
Happy Christmas.
And now for some bonus content from the lovely Richard.
So for those who were in Doctor Who fandom in Victoria in the late 90s, they might remember that we ran a convention called Timestorm, which had Sophie Aldred as guest of honour. Now, as was probably the norm at the time. The guest was often asked maybe to bring 1 or 2 items if they had anything left, so we could auction them in the charity auction at the convention.
Yeah.
And Sophie brought a couple of things she'd written for DWM, I think, that hadn't seen print. I think there was an interview with Tom Baker and something else that hadn't actually been printed. But the big item she brought was actually her Batman earring that she's wearing in this. And if you look in the close-up, she is wearing it.
Yes.
Now, the story behind it is, now, she actually told it, and I have got her on tape telling the story, but she told it as having happened during Remembrance of the Daleks. It actually happened during this. In one ear, she's wearing a Batman earring, because she thought it was her own, and she thought that was really cool, and it'd be really funky to see Ace wearing a Batman earring type thing. Of course, not really understanding about continuity and whatever, during the production, it broke. And, of course, there was a big kerfuffle, because they're like, well, we don't have another one to replace it. And we've already established that you're wearing the earring in some of the close-up shots. She was profusely apologetic, and they sort of said, well, where'd you get it? And she sort of gave them a rough idea it was a market here or somewhere. And they actually had to send some poor production person scurrying around sort of the markets of London to come up with another one, which is, which I think she kept, and I got the one that broke. But I do have that. It is safe in my little Doctor Who shrine at home.
Can I ask you how much you paid for that piece of merchandise? How's your kidney?
No, I can't remember. It was in the hundreds of dollars, because it was probably the one big thing I bought myself when I was at the convention.
Fair enough.
Because there was quite a bit of stuff got sold in the auction. It wasn't all from Sophie. There was a few things that got sold, but that was the one big thing I bought for myself.
Fantastic.
And I am terribly sorry. I have been asked a few times over the years to provide a close-up image of
yes.
it, which I have refused, and I'm sorry, but that is my little piece of the show. It is my intention to hang on to it.
Fair enough. So the Phil Morris of earrings is refusing to hand it over. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
God love you.